Velocity Kinetics, another edition of We Answer. Now, whilst I was recently away in Thetford seeing my family, we got talking about cars and electric cars, and I was talking with my brother, and we were talking about the electric car and how it charges and things like that. Naturally, he has range anxiety about electric vehicles, like most people do, and until you can get a decent amount of miles using everything on a car, people are always going to have range anxiety. But I was telling him about something called regenerative braking that electric vehicles and hybrid vehicles have. And he went, well, what's regenerative braking? So, here is this edition of We Answer. We Answer, what is regenerative braking?
So, before you get to any braking phase, first off, you have acceleration. So, put your foot down. So after you've had your acceleration phase and maintained your speed for however long you need to maintain it for, it then comes the braking phase. Whether that's before a corner, to stop, or for an obstacle. How you stop is another matter altogether. Now, one way of stopping is just by slamming on the brakes. This gets the car stopped, but it is not the most effective way of stopping. Automatic cars only have this option to stop because there are no gears to slow them down. A better way to slow the car down, rather than just stamping on the brakes, is slow and gradual braking with a little bit of lift and coast if you've got the option to do so. So you don't slam on your stoppers, you just gently ride them. You might be braking for a lot longer than you might like to do so. The brake lights might be on for a lot longer than you would like them to be on for, but nonetheless it is a very slow and far more efficient than just bang on the stoppers. A better way of stopping, where possible, is something called engine braking. Now, this only applies to manual vehicles. There is an asterisk to this, where it can apply to some automatic vehicles. And why I say some, not all, because normally an automatic car doesn't have any way of overriding what gear you want to be in. The exception is Tiptronic, or Geartronic, or something that has a paddle override. But there is an asterisk to this asterisk. A lot of an automotive vehicle's computers will only change up and down when it wants to do so. So you can't just whack it down the gear when you want. The car's got to be ready to do it. So what is engine braking? Well, it can come in a couple of forms. Now, one form, this is on lorries that I know of, and I've only ever come across this on ice road truckers, but it doesn't mean to say it isn't something in Europe. Some lorries have what's called a jake brake. So it's a mechanism you flip on the dashboard of the truck. It then limits the movement of the piston in the cylinder, then minimizes the amount of power that can be generated, which then in turn slows the car, or should I say slows the lorry down. In a road car, engine braking is basically you using the forces within the engine to retard the acceleration or retard the speed that you've built up. Now, you would do this in a combination of braking and you would also do it in a combination of lifting off. What you would effectively do is your gear match the speed that you're doing. So you wouldn't just whack it into first and go engine braking. That won't work. You'll end up with a pile of cogs and bits all over the road, and a very unhappy AA or RAC patrol person having to pick up the bits. You do it slowly and gradually. So say, for instance, you're doing 60 miles an hour in fifth gear. You would lift off, let the car come down a bit in speed, drop it down into fourth. You might get a blip on the throttle. You might occasionally need to put a tiny bit of gas on to get the gear to go in. So you do it's called blip the throttle, drop it down, and then engine will then rev up, and then it will slow itself down again to match the speed that you're trying to do. And then again, you just repeat that down through the gears. It's a good way to do it in combination with braking. It's a very efficient way to slow down, because it's more efficient to slow down through engine braking than just to stand on the throttle. It is also, in the long run, kinder to the car, because you're not wearing out your brakes as fast, you're not going through pads and shoes as quickly. It is not always possible to do it. It is something you need to try and do if you're managing your gaps correctly to the car in front, or if you're the car in front, so long as the other person behind isn't up your trumpet, then it is a good way of slowing down. Mind you, that said, if someone is really that close behind you, it is a good way of gradually slowing down rather than worrying about someone just coming flying into the back of you. But tap the brake a tiny bit first so they know you're going to be slowing down. Anyway, once you've built up your speed, and then you need to slow down in an electric or hybrid vehicle, there is this option of regenerative braking. Now, most electric vehicles, or vehicles that have an electric component to them, so whether this is what they call a self-charging hybrid, which is kind of what regenerative braking will lead to, or whether it's a plug-in hybrid, or whether it's just a full-on electric vehicle, they will have an element of regenerative braking. Formula 1 uses regenerative braking. LMP1 uses regenerative braking, at least on the hybrid vehicles, that is. Formula E uses regenerative braking. It's a brilliant way of tapping into energy. Now, as it is on a normal combustion vehicle, even with engine braking, the kinetic energy built up in movement is just wasted into heat when you have to use your brakes or have to slow down in general. There's no way to recapture it. The only real way to do that is to basically build up some sort of, well, really you need a hybrid system. The only way to do it. Now, most electric motors work like a normal motor. When you're going forwards, that's it, they're going forwards. When you reverse, that's it, they're going in reverse. So they let you move. But in regenerative braking, and depending on the sort of electric vehicle you use, you can change how severe this is, and likewise in most hybrids you can change how severe this is. But what happens is, rather than using your actual brakes, if you use regenerative braking, it turns the motor into a generator. So suddenly, as you're slowing down, the motor becomes a generator, then the forces of slowing down spin up the generator to create energy, which then tops up the batteries, which you can then use again in acceleration. It's a good way to get around range anxiety on an electric car, because you can keep constantly topping up the battery. Now, it's never going to be perfect enough to make it so you don't ever need to charge the vehicle, because even vehicles like from the hyper hybrids, the McLaren P1 and the Porsche 918, they use tricks like this as well to top up the electricity available. It's quite simply, the regenerative braking is quite simply a way of getting the energy back from the braking phase. The Nissan Leaf uses it a lot, the Tesla uses it an awful lot. So all it simply does is it makes your motor, when the motor's running normally, there's no resistance. It allows you to speed up, slow down, go in reverse, JD, job done, all day long. The moment you then go into regenerative braking, the motor creates resistance. Your slowing down then makes the generator move. So you think about it, you've probably seen a science experiment where it's your hand cycle or your foot cycle and turns on a light bulb or light bulbs. That's kind of essentially what it's doing. It's probably as simple as I can put it. So regenerative braking is just the motor becoming a generator to then top up the battery, which you can then use again in acceleration later. But there is a massive, massive asterisk to the regenerative braking. Number one, not all cars have as efficient a system as each other. So it varies from car to car. So some cars will have a fantastic system, some of them will not have as good a system as you could have. 2, the system is only as efficient as the driver. Likewise with any vehicle you own, electric, hybrid, petrol, diesel, steam, oil, you name it. You can make, if you can make your car run on it, it's only as efficient as the driver. So you've got to gently accelerate in whatever vehicle you're using. You've got to gently slow down, use whatever regenerative options you've got, whatever engine braking capabilities you have. So we answer, what is regenerative braking? Regenerative braking, short, the TLDR version, your electric motor becomes a generator. The generator works with the slowing down the vehicle, no braking, you lift off, creates resistance, slows the car down, that resistance becomes energy into the battery. You can then use that again for acceleration later. And thank you for watching this edition of We Answer. Please donate via paypal.me/velocitykinetics. And I hope you enjoyed this slightly different version of videos. Thank you.